Okay, good morning, everyone. I will call this meeting to order at 10:10 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, because Ontario is dumb. We go first to the territorial acknowledgement. Students' Council of the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association acknowledges that we live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, land promised to the Six Nations, which includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. I suppose on a personal note, I have lived my whole life on the Haldimand Tract as a settler. And I guess I encourage everybody, no matter where they find themselves in the world, to reflect on the relationship of Indigenous peoples to lands wherever they are, and to think about how they, how we personally play a role in ongoing systems of colonialism. We go next to approval of the agenda. So I'm actually going to, there's a motion in the agenda resolved that council approve the agenda as presented. I'm actually going to move that council consider in business arising from the minutes the sustainability policy for approval. I sent it in an email. Council has previously considered this, but because the board hadn't and some procedural shenanigans, we were unable to approve it. Board has now considered and recommended its adoption by council. So that is a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second. Ben, just a quick question, because I know part of the report said you want to change the meeting for the next month. Can we just do it here?
To add an item to consider that?
Yeah.
Sure. It can also be a motion arising from my report, which might be logistically simpler.
Fair.
So yeah, we'll do that when we get to my report. So right now we have a motion moved by myself, seconded by Cannon, to amend the agenda to add approval of the sustainability policy and business arising. Does anybody wish to speak to that motion? Okay, hearing none, we will go to a vote. And I should say as well, welcome. We have some new counselors joining us. Apologies if I'm just getting into procedural stuff right away, but typically in online meetings, the way that we conduct votes is we ask for the negatives first, then abstentions, and then usually it's implied you're in favor if you say neither. So I will ask, does anybody oppose the motion to approve the agenda? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, that carries unanimously. So we've amended the agenda to add in business arising the sustainability policy for approval. That brings us to approval of the minutes. There is a motion. Be it resolved that council approves the minutes of the May 16th, 2021 and June 11, 2021 meetings as presented.
Sorry, that was a leftover by mistake.
Okay. So there is no motion. There are no minutes to be approved. We go to reports. We start with executive reports, and my executive report. I will go to it right now. So of course I submitted a written report. A couple of highlights that I should mention. I attended the Student Union Development Summit with the Vice President Education and one of the Associate Vice Presidents Government Affairs at UBC Vancouver last weekend. It was a really cool opportunity, I thought, for sort of my professional development in this role, and also to have the opportunity to meet with student leaders in positions like mine across the country. I talk in a bit more detail about some of the sessions that I attended. I'll just say to council, I think that this is an opportunity that is worth supporting. Typically, the conference runs at the end of August. Obviously, COVID year, it's a bit different. But I would encourage that council consider continuing to fund this opportunity, perhaps for the entire executive committee to attend. I noticed while I was there, many schools sent their executive teams, and the conference functioned really as sort of an executive retreat. Historically, the executives, outgoing and incoming executive teams, spend a weekend in Niagara Falls before May to sort of do some team building. And unfortunately, this year we haven't been able to do that. So for council's consideration, not that there's an item arising from it or anything, then I guess sort of the big part of my report is on the governance review. We expect to receive the final report on the 8th of November. Council is due to meet on the 14th of November. So that's the following Sunday. I am going to suggest that council consider postponing its meeting to the 21st of November to give councilors a full 2 weeks, or it might be a little less than 2 weeks, because board will initially receive the report and then it'll be shared with council. But we expect in the second week of November to send it to council. Give councilors more than a week to review the report. Obviously, we expect pretty substantial recommendations on the governing documents, including bylaw amendments, and want to make sure that councilors have enough time to know what they're looking at and what is being asked of them. So I guess I will move now that council reschedule its November regular meeting from the 14th of November to the 21st of November, and we'll keep the time at 10 a.m. So is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it, Vicky.
Okay, thanks, Vicky. So yeah, I hope I guess established the reason that I'm asking for this. I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about asking to reschedule the council meeting. Okay, seeing none, we'll go to a vote. Does anybody oppose rescheduling the meeting of council from the 14th to the 21st of November at 10 a.m. Eastern? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, that carries unanimously. So we will follow up logistically after the meeting, but good to know. Going back to my report, basically what I'm planning is when council meets and receives the report next month, that I will put a motion before council to basically accept the report and task the board with drafting bylaw amendments to its effect. And then board will sort of have some work to do, and I am planning to call the governance committee next week, I think. Yeah, like the first week in November, that is, to sort of support me in that work. There's also, I referenced in my report, but it's also in Business Arising, a motion to postpone the start of the election period. Since we are likely going to be amending bylaws, the positions that are available for election will likely change. It's unreasonable to hold an election for positions that might not exist. The Elections and Referenda Committee met last week to ratify the results of the by-election that we held this fall. In addition, they approved delaying that decision to today. So you'll notice in Business Arising a motion specifically on this. So that's that for my report. Happy to take any questions. Okay, Cannon, I see.
I know this is a bit in advance because we haven't really seen the report, but are there any concerns that due to the changes recommended by the consultants and the implementation of them being so fast, it might hinder more people getting involved, especially in our governance structure, because there's going to be a lot of chaos happening around that time?
Sorry, can you just repeat it might require board being involved? Is that what you said?
Sorry, I can rephrase. So basically, with all the changes that might happen in a really short period of time, are there any concerns that more people will be hesitant to get involved in our governance structure and how that can affect the next year? Because like if we are trying to change things before the next election happens, it has to have a really fast turnaround.
What I will say, that's a good question. So in our bylaws presently, it requires that we hold the general election before reading week, which is the third week of February traditionally. In other models, student unions will hold their elections like in March. So it may be possible that we postpone the election in general. So instead of just compressing the timeline, we simply just push it back. And that would, I guess, help to make up for lost time that, like, by delaying the start of the election, we sort of add on later beyond reading week. I mean, it's no secret to anyone here that we have issues with engagement in general. But it's definitely something worth considering, Cannon.
On the topic of postponing elections to like March, I know from what I've heard from previous execs and also these execs that the time period for transition already is quite short, and it can be overwhelming for most people, especially when they're trying to do their finals or just working part-time on co-ops or whatever they're doing. There could have adverse effects on that too. So I'm just struggling, like in all honesty, I'm struggling with implementing these changes so quickly that it might harm us in long term or even short term.
Sure. I guess I'll say I'll have better answers for this when we have the report before us, because it's hard to speak specifically about things in the absence of a report. I saw Matthew had a hand up as well.
I was just going to jump in and say something to some effect because I've been involved with this as well. Not too important, but certainly that's being kept in mind. But to be honest, I'm not too concerned. Of course, it's going to depend on what the specifics of the report are. I'm not too concerned about that as a risk, because one of the directions we're trying to go with is one of the purposes is simplifying our governance so that people can get involved. We know we have very, very poor engagement already. I think we all in the room know this. And I think that any amount of simplification of our governance procedure and making things clearer for students, I think that's just going to have a benefit. And I don't think that the slightly accelerated timeline that this is looking at is too much of a risk, but for sure, keeping that in mind. And we will be able to like specifically discuss this once we have the report in hand.
Thank you.
Thanks both. Are there any other questions for, I guess, the report of the president in general? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to the report of the, Vice President Education, who I believe is not present. Steph is feeling under the weather. So what I'll say is Steph traveled with me to Vancouver, attended the same conference that I did, of course. Specifically from her perspective, it was, I guess, a good opportunity to meet USA people and UCRU, that being the Ontario Undergraduate Student Alliance and the undergraduates of Canadian Research Intensive Universities, the provincial and federal advocacy alliances of which USA is a member. The USA General Assembly is coming up on the 31st. So next weekend, it's sort of a weekend long thing. We are short a couple of delegates, I understand. So if you're interested in working on some policy, the paper's up for review this time. So USA has a policy library. They advocate on those at Queen's Park. This year, we're doing system vision and accountability, Indigenous students, and credit mobility and transfer in a response to COVID-19, I believe, are the 4 papers. If you're interested in doing a little bit of policy work, short notice, but it would be helpful to make sure that WUSA is properly represented. We're one of the larger member institutions of USA, so at General Assembly we get, I think, 12 voting delegates, compared to some schools have like, 2. So it would be nice if we had a full slate of delegates to make sure Waterloo is well represented. So you can reach out to me or Steph, probably me first, I guess, because Steph I shouldn't be giving her work while she's ill. Yeah, that is Steph's report. Happy to hear any questions and try my best. Okay, seeing none. Unless, actually, sorry, I don't have a chat open, so maybe that's ignorant. Vincent, sorry. Can't hear you, Vincent. I don't know if you're talking to a muted mic. Okay, Vincent says he will send the questions in chat. While Steph is feeling unwell, should we direct any questions regarding her portfolio to you? I'm happy, to help, sure. Works for me. Okay, any other questions for Steph? Okay, Vincent will try to reconnect. Okay, so we will move now to the report of the Vice President, Operations and Finance.
Wow. All right. So I don't have a huge amount to add to my report. Unfortunately for you all the fun stuff from my portfolio goes to board. But I will highlight a couple of things for you. Number one, as I have for in the previous months, I'll talk. The UPass has concluded finally. So the opt-out opportunity for students residing outside of the region ended on September 28th. And I believe now all students that have applied have received a word back from us. And if they didn't have sufficient proof, they've been reached out for additional proof. All the credit for that goes phenomenally to Mike, who's editing this meeting. It should, I'll note that there was some very minor student displeasure about some parts of the UPass, but it's a very regular thing of understandable annoyance with a universal bus pass. That's the nature of what the UPass is. So that's unsurprising. And similarly, the change of coverage period for WUSA's healthcare plan has now rolled up on September 28th. So that is all completed and students can no longer make changes to those. Don't have any other updates outside of that or nothing else that I want to call out to you.
Thanks, Matthew. Are there any questions for the VPOF? Hearing none, we will move to the report of the Vice President's Student Life.
Hello. I'm not going to speak to anything that is in my written report. So just 2 other things, I guess. So one is Ben was talking about the USA stuff. Since Steph is feeling unwell, I'm sort of helping with coordinating that stuff. So I guess I am also an option to message. I guess Ben gave all the information, but basically next week it is, it takes place over 4 days, the General Assembly, but You really only have to commit to next Sunday, I guess the first half of the day for plenary, where we're voting on the papers, and that's when it's really nice for us to be able to fill out our entire I guess, array of delegate votes, just to make sure that we have proper say. So it'd be hugely appreciated if you have any amount of interest, just messaging Ben or me, and then we can see if that's a possibility. The other thing that is just for information for council is that the Sustainability Commissioner, who's currently Jenna Phillips, has drafted a proposal for a sustainability committee that she would chair, basically, and it would have a representative from each faculty, as well as a swath of at-large people, if they're interested. And basically, it would serve as a nice advisory / information sharing body for between the Sustainability Commissioner as well as all the faculty societies. And she's hoping to pilot that for next term, and unless council has any objections to the concept, in response to which I would send out the thing and we could properly talk about it. I have thumbs up her piloting it, and then after the pilot, we will look at whether we want to establish it as a standing committee of council or some other situation.
Thanks, Catherine. And yeah, I should say Catherine is taking the lead on USA specific stuff for the VPED portfolio, so feel free to contact her. All right. Looks like Vicky has a question.
Hi, Catherine. For the committee, are you also including, like, you said faculty, but does that also include like the university colleges, or would they fall under faculty?
Yes, I misspoke. It also has a rep from the satellite campuses and the colleges.
Thanks both. Next is a question from Cannon.
Catherine, what's the status on the scholarship for our team? Oh, the bursary, sorry, not scholarship.
Last I heard was that there was still ongoing discussions with that as part of strategic planning. I'll be honest that I haven't been very hands-on with that because orientation is a pretty well-staffed department, I guess, that I don't peek my head into that often. But if you like, I can check to make sure that there's been ongoing progress on that.
I am kind of disappointed because I think this project has been happening for over 2.5 years now, and it seems like the amount of time USA has taken to create a single bursary application is sad, because there goes another year where our orientation experience is being led by people who are able to afford to volunteer the huge amount of resources required and time required to run OT. And it does impact our incoming first-year students or transfer students. And I think last term, or maybe end of winter term, there was a report submitted by orientation department saying that they are going to do this, and I'm disappointed that did not happen before the hiring for next year's O team. That's where I'm going to leave it.
I know. And I do appreciate the constant checking in on that. It's really, that's what counselors are there for, to make sure that operationalization of, well, not all that counselors are there for, but making sure that what's on students' minds is still being brought up. So thanks, Cannon.
All right, thanks both. Next, we move to the report of the Board of Directors. I am not sure if Abby is present. I should also say, for the new counselors joining us, we have a system to request speaking turns via the chat function of Teams. where you put a number 1 in the chat is to be added to the queue, and if you have a direct response to anything that's been raised, you put in a number 2. Oh.
I don't think that he put it in the chat. I was going to say, I think that Vincent mentioned ahead of time to me that he had some questions.
That was me putting it in the chat.
Okay, sure. And I'll just say also for if at any time you're confused about what's going on, you can put in like a point of inquiry. You type POI and ask away, and we'll try to help you out. So Vincent, next.
Yeah, I had a question about your written report. Specifically, there were some items in the raises section that I don't know, maybe I'm not reading it wrong, but it was a little troubling to me. It looks like for I think this was for the spring 2020. Everyone can hear me, right? My mic's working.
Yeah.
Okay. This is for the spring 2020 term, right? And it looks like 0 office hours, 0 everything. Like it seems like they weren't operating or doing anything. I was wondering if you could explain that. Also, when they talk about the challenges of this term, they said their challenge was reading the biased services report. I read the services report. One of the things about Raise that troubled me in that report is it said they weren't welcoming to STEM students. I represent math students, which is included in STEM. So it's a bit troubling to me that they seem to not be accepting, I guess, what the report said. And so wondering, like, what are you doing there? What will you do, since I'm looking at this report from them? It sounds like they are rejecting the services review. And so what are you doing to ensure that, nevertheless, that the problem areas that were identified in the service review, that something is done about them, specifically about making sure that Raise and I think some of the other equity services are more welcoming to STEM students?
Yeah, I guess I'll go in order of questions asked. It was decided ahead of time, so I think in the term before, it was established between the coordinators at the time and the services manager that spring 2021 would be a planning term, especially coming off of the term where exchanges is held, which is really big term. My understanding is they sort of pulled back from external facing operations and focused on laying the groundwork for some other ongoing initiatives and projects, such as, I believe, the mentorship program. So sort of planning for the terms ahead. So that was planned, and the services manager was aware of that and was part of making that decision that that would be the case. It wasn't something that the coordinators went off and did without prior knowledge from everybody else involved. So I hope that answers your question. But if you have concerns about that, I can sort of take that back. And then in terms of the second question, I was also a little bit startled seeing that, I guess. It was a concern that they had made clear to me prior, back in spring term. In particular, the section that I believe there was concern, a bias with, or I suppose less bias and more just concern with, were sections where it was, I guess, implied that the space was unwelcoming to Jewish students. And so they had some concerns with that putting off Jewish students from accessing the service. So that's something that I'm aware of as a concern from their end about the services review. Otherwise, implementation of it, you know, I do high level overseeing of the implementation of recommendations from the service review and addressing the issues that are raised in it. So I guess what I'm saying is that if I become aware of, I guess, pushing aside of certain comments in the services review because of perception of them being biased, I can make sure that they are still addressed.
Okay, Vincent has a follow-up.
So it's two follow-up questions. Do you agree with the characterization that the services review was biased and not just restricted to raise, but I think several services were mentioned in the service review as not being welcoming to STEM students? Has there been any progress on working to make sure that all the services are welcoming to all of our students, including STEM students specifically?
I do not believe with the I do not agree with the characterization of the services review as biased. I have a lot of faith in the data collected and conclusions drawn from the services review, and I really think that it's a good big picture look at everything. And no, I don't think that it's biased in any way. And then for the second one, that is a concern that is both brought up in the services review and is something that I've heard from a lot of students anecdotally. So it's something that I am very, very aware of. And it's something that I do plan to do my best to address before the end of my term. And that might include more than one step, just because culture shift is complicated, and we're only just beginning to move back into the new spaces, and it's especially complex to solve when there isn't a huge pool of students applying to be part of executive teams and stuff like that. So it's a bit of a complex problem, but I am more than aware of it. So fear not, it shan't be forgotten.
Thanks, Catherine. Thanks, Vincent. Now we go to Cannon.
Something that I had kind of forgotten, but I just remembered on talk of service review. Has there been any progress made on seeing the impact of FUSA starting to pay the coordinators? Has there been any more accountability or any more work that they're doing? Because this was something that was supposed to be done once we started paying them. And I'm just wondering, like, council has not received any kind of report on this. And just want to see how we are doing there.
Yeah, I guess for context for all counselors, it was in winter of 2020 that a motion was passed at the general meeting, which is a meeting of delegates, for council to consider an implementation of paying coordinators, because prior to that, coordinators were volunteer positions with the opportunity for honorarium. And then there was implementation being planned in the subsequent year, and then in winter 2021, that was the first term that coordinators were part-time staff positions, so they are paid hourly wages. Each service has a different ceiling on how many hours the coordinators are expected to work at a maximum, because that number of hours fluctuates each week depending on what needs to be done. And so this term marks the third term, so the last term in a year of coordinators being paid. In the original approval for the plan, there was also, I guess, a note that council was to receive a set of success criteria, and I don't believe that that ever happened. So I am actually in the process of trying to look at old documents as well as the services review and develop a set of success criteria that we can look at, because as we're coming up on 1 year of paying coordinators, I do think that it's appropriate to begin taking a look at whether it's been a positive change to our services system. And then also being aware of the caveat that obviously they've only ever been paid during COVID terms, so being mindful of what we compare certain things to. But I agree that levels, like I guess quality of work and accountability are both very important, and non-COVID affected quality of service from court, quality of work that is done directly by the coordinators and is not like the service provided to students. So the long-winded answer compiled down into one sentence is yes, success criteria or evaluation has not happened yet, but I am currently working on it.
Thanks, Catherine. Now we go to Amelia.
Yeah, I was also pretty shocked to see what Raise had said about the services review in their end of term report. Especially since I was involved in helping like data collection on that report, even though I was not involved in writing it or the analyzation. I know that the authors of the report do an incredible job of writing reports for WUSA in an unbiased manner, just using the data that was collected from the surveys. So I was pretty upset to see that they thought it was biased and that they had said something about like no later follow-up meeting, especially, and this kind of answers your question, Vincent, as well. Some of the other equity seeking services had contacted the research department or research team at WUSA after the services review was sent to them to ask for some like research help in coordinating follow-up research the services were going to do about the issues addressed in the report. But as far as I know, Raise was not one of them who had contacted the research team back in the spring. So I'm pretty concerned that the Raise is just thinking that there's some bias and basically like coming up with complaints of no follow-up meeting when, as to my knowledge, the no follow-up meeting was ever requested by them. But to my other point, I do know that some other equity seeking services were trying to set up research that they were going to do themselves to gain more information about the issues that were brought up in the report, particularly about not being welcoming to STEM students. And they had reached out to the WUSA research team who had conducted the services report for some help and guidance.
Thanks, Amelia.
All right, thanks everyone. So it looks like we've exhausted the speaking list for
Sorry.
Sure.
I kind of remember things in breaks, so I apologize for just putting them. Catherine, at the last meeting there was a motion to discuss whether services advocacy should be part of a services mandate or not, especially in our equity seeking services, and that motion was tabled. I'm just wondering, is that something we should be expecting to come to council anytime soon? And if there has been any update on after discussions with our services?
I thought it was going to be automatically onto this agenda, but I was also planning to withdraw it because basically discussion with service coordinators has been slow, mostly at my fault. It's been a busy month, and it was pretty, I don't know, I guess like personally challenging to engage in those conversations for a multitude of reasons. And so basically where I'm at with that is that I guess barring council's objection to it, it's a pretty operational thing to align job descriptions with the existing mandates in council procedures. So I was just gonna work with services and the service manager offline and make those changes, and then yes, probably after the governance review, we can expect other stuff coming to council, potentially about service mandates.
Thank you.
All right. Now it appears we have exhausted the speaking list for the report of the Vice President Student Life, which brings us to the report of the Board of Directors. I guess in Abby's absence, I will report that the board met last week. We passed the sustainability policy. We talked about the governance review. I reported on the Student Union Development Summit. I'm trying to think. I think it was a pretty light agenda. We meet next in November. Although I guess the board, I will call a special meeting of the board to receive the governance review report when we received it in the second week in November. We've instructed them to write the report in such a way that it can be shared publicly, but the board, I guess, gets the first right of refusal if there's anything that they think should not be shared publicly. Is this a new? No, Cannon asked that already. Okay, now we go to representative reports. First is the Arts Caucus.
Hi, everyone. So the big thing that the Arts Caucus has been working on is getting our Instagram up and running. If you guys would like to promote the Instagram, that would be really great. I'm going to drop the Instagram handle in the chat because we don't have a whole lot of followers. I reached out to like some of the arts and WUSA contacts that I know, but we really hope to get a lot more engagement with people on that, and it'll be a good platform for like promoting surveys and links and stuff. So really excited about that, and that's the biggest thing we've had going on.
Thanks, Rebecca. I'm happy to hear that you've got a handle sorted out. So I'll follow personally. Okay, that brings us to Engineering Caucus.
Hey guys, I don't think there's anything in particular, but a few days ago, a few constituents did sort of informally reach out to me over the weekend regarding the homeless shelter near campus. So the concerns were mostly like regarding personal security, because the shelter is so close to campus, and we're wondering if WUSA could or has sort of done anything about it in the past. And besides that, on another note, just wanted to report that the E7 Coffee and Donut store is open. But yeah, I think that's it.
Cool. Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I'll say, I guess my understanding is that the homeless shelter in a former WCRI building, the city is basically occupying it as a private tenant. So there's nothing really that can be done. And I'll just say, like, on a personal note, like, the student association to engage in NIMBYism really like puts me off. Like, there are students who experience homelessness. I guess understand that, like, it's important that students feel safe, but I don't think, like, I think a lot of the discourse on like dealing with the homeless problem is like kind of toxic and makes me uneasy to engage with from the perspective of the student association. But that is my personal opinion. WUSA doesn't have any stance on it, like, officially. Catherine has a direct response.
Yeah, I guess what Ben said was it doesn't have an official stance unless council is interested in doing that. I personally have heard a lot of concerns from students about, not being against having a homeless shelter, obviously, but having concerns about one being basically touching residences' with a lot of vulnerable first years living on their own for the first time. And I have, again, I am just raising concerns and this is, I'm just raising concerns that I've heard from students who have mentioned that they've lived in Waterloo in the past, and this last couple of terms they have in that area experienced increased levels of harassment or comparable activities that have made them feel very unsafe walking around in the couple of blocks around their own campus. So I guess just noting that. And I can confirm what Ben said, that it is in the Hammer building that is owned by WCRI, which also owns like Fenwick and Carver and A dorms and those buildings. And it is, my understanding is that they have an agreement with the city that has them, what Ben said basically is a private tenant of the place. I'm not sure how long that agreement was. The agreement was made before I had my stint as a director on their board, prior to becoming an exec here. But I believe as a member of WCRI, I might be able to ask for that information if council is interested in having that discussion.
Thanks, Catherine. Cannon has a direct response.
I'm looking at this at more, and call me selfish, but I'm putting student interest before general public interest. As from what I've heard from students, there is a lot of difficulty trying to find places for living in for the winter term. WCRI was one of the places like that does provide good, reliable, non-praying housing for students around Waterloo region. So maybe since students are coming back, I think we should be advocating more for student housing. Like I know, like I don't want to kick those people who are homeless out of Hammer, but at the same time, I think we have a lot of students who are facing difficulty finding housing for winter term. So this might be something that we might want to look into.
Okay, I'll let Catherine respond, but I'll say beyond that, any more discussion, we should just do this in new business, because this is going to like balloon into a large discussion about housing in Waterloo. So I'll let Catherine respond, and sorry, Vincent, I started talking before you two came in, to cut it off, unless it's related to a question for the engineering caucus.
First off, I guess, you know, our job is to place students' interests in front of anybody else's. We are a union and in effect a lobby group, which is pretty uncomfortable sometimes from a personal standpoint. Anyway, the agreement was made during the height of like COVID stuff, and I believe it's public, since the operating structure WCI makes it so, that basically the organization that was having a lot of difficulty filling units and was financially in a really bad place, which is why they made that agreement, because at the time they didn't have enough tenants to fill spaces at all. So I guess just some insight onto the decision to block off a chunk of student housing for non-student use.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. So again, anybody is welcome to raise a discussion on housing and the return to campus in new business, but we will move to the report of the Environment Caucus. I'm not hearing anything from Environment Caucus. I don't know if somebody's speaking on mute or it's like the Spider-Man who's going standoff, you know.
Nothing to report from environment.
I think I heard Nashmia and then Connor. Connor, you can go ahead.
All right. So one of the most important environment updates is that we're awaiting approval from WUSA for reopening the ESS lounge and office. So we got the faculty approval, but we're just waiting on WUSA for the go-ahead. But other than that, nothing other too major to report.
Thanks, Connor. All right. Any questions for environment? I know Matthew is sort of liaising on the coffee shop stuff on our end. Okay, seeing no more questions, or no questions for Environment Caucus, we go to health.
Hi, this is Marie from the Health Caucus. I can't find the meeting for some reason. There it is. And this month, we don't have a ton going on, but our student society is back up and running events for students again, which is exciting. And our faculty buildings have reopened with amended hours, but they're now open for use, so that's also pretty cool. And our student lounge has also reopened for health students, and they've received necessary information for that.
All right, thanks, Marie. Any questions for Health Caucus? Seeing none, we will go to mathematics. Matthew has a comment, I guess, sort of relating to environment reopening, but societies in general, our safety people are talking to environment faculty, safety people, expecting a result soon, especially since the faculty itself is signed off. Okay, thanks, Matthew. We go to mathematics. Go ahead, Cannon.
In terms of MathSoc, we have our general elections for next term happening right now. We have one competitive race, which I'm really happy about. Finally, something to vote on. In terms of faculty, the community engagement officer for the faculty ran a bunch of wellness events over the month of September, which included rock climbing wall, disc golf, yoga, and I forgot one more thing. There are plans to do more of these monthly events starting next term based on different wellness, physical, spiritual, mental health, and the Farm LLC, which is the first LLC happening in the Faculty of Math, seems to be going great. The feedback that we have received so far. And we are hoping that over the next few years, we'll expand into other programs and see where that goes. Yeah, that's all I have.
Thanks, Cannon. I have to say the farm living learning community sounds very different than what it actually is. But we'll
they
nevertheless
all farm together.
Yes, that's right. Learn to live off the earth. Okay, Vincent withdraws. Seeing no questions for the Mathematics Caucus, we will move to science.
I'm not sure if there's anyone from science there because I know Manasvi gave her regrets. Well, there's the new science counselor, I guess, if they want to add anything.
Sure. I'll do an introduction to Harkarat, who was just elected this past week to Science Council and a Senate seat as well. So I guess, yeah, please give a warm welcome. Do some clap emojis in the chat. Welcome to council. Yeah, it's good to have you on board. On council, not on board. Cool. We will go to Cambridge. Not sure if there's a representative from Cambridge present, but I will say Steph and I met this week with the co-president and a couple of the vice presidents of the Waterloo Architecture Student Association. And I'm drawing a blank on their names, which is really bad. But anyway, we were talking about sort of how we can help support them at the Cambridge satellite campus and sort of the issues that they're experiencing there, particularly around sort of difficulty finding housing and transit connectivity to main campus, particularly for those who want to take electives in non-architecture subjects. It's sort of difficult to get to campus, so it forces you to take online courses, which in the pandemic has not been a big deal, but like traditionally it's like an hour and a half to bus from Galt to Waterloo. So sort of talked about those issues. Yeah, we'll go to Kitchener next.
Hi everyone, my name is Angad. I am the president of SOFS. I'm technically not the Kitchener representative, but I have good news. We have finally gotten someone to take on the role of Kitchener representative. So they will be onboarded very soon, and they will hopefully be at meetings moving forward as well. So I usually don't do these updates just because I want to leave it to that person. But just wanted to say, I know we haven't had a Kitchener representative for a while. It's been a bit of a tough position to fill, unfortunately, especially with the pandemic. But good news is that we do have someone. So we're hoping that moving forward, they can provide some more reports. I mean, I can always give updates as to kind of what's going on in pharmacy. We don't have too much, but we received a healthy sum of money for renovating our basement, which is our common student space at the Kitchener campus. And so we're looking forward to pretty much doing that. But yeah, other than that, we've just kind of been holding events. We do have some cohorts in person right now, and we're expecting to be, fully in person by the time January rolls around. But other than that, yeah, not too many big updates.
Thanks, Angad. Seeing no questions for Kitchener/pharmacy, we will go to Stratford/GBDA.
Hi everyone. I was just elected in the past week as well, so I'm still trying to get accustomed to everything going on.
Thanks very much, Gia, and welcome. I sort of was giving instructions throughout, so yeah, it's very nice to have you joining us. The very quick instructions for how to council. In the chat function of Teams, you'll probably have noticed that people are putting in ones to be recognized for speaking turns, and there's sort of direct responses. And then I believe Catherine put in earlier sort of the guide for how to get, there's points of information, order, or personal privilege. I'll copy them again. Yeah, very nice to have you on council, and welcome. And we go now to St. Jerome's. Hearing nothing for St. Jerome's, we will go to Renison.
Hi everyone, Vicky here from Renison. So some things that have happened at Renison/Rask is Next Thursday at 7 p.m., they're holding a double feature movie of Beetlejuice and Scream. There's a QR code on the Instagram for Renison College to register if you're interested in watching one of those two movies. Also, there was this past week in full day in person, I guess you'd say, interview like thing for a potential one of the BPADs, and then that's happening again this week, this coming week. So hopefully by next council meeting there should be a BPAD that's been chosen. And for context, the BPAD is just the dean, the academic dean, and like a senior executive administration at Renison, since I know last time staff was a little confused, so I just thought I would put that context. So that's going all swimmingly. There's nothing too much else I think I have to update.
All right, thanks, Vicky. I see there's a legacy speaking order for staff under Renison, but of course she's not here. Seeing no questions for Renison, we will go to the officers report. I have nothing to report as speaker, so we'll go to Cannon.
Only thing to report, it is really difficult figuring out attendance when regrets go to multiple people. So coming up with a solution for that, hopefully starting next term, and we'll see where that goes. Other than that, making agendas is the best part of my week. And I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Cannon. We go next to the report of the secretary, Mr. Schwartz.
I don't have a huge amount to say, unless the recording secretaries they'd like to get across. They're the real stars of the show, to be honest with you.
Oh, that's so nice. I will just mention apologies to everybody. The recording should have been up on YouTube a couple weeks ago, but we had some technical difficulties. I'm sure it still exists. Just in the weird way that I logged into the meeting last time, I was not able to access it. So we need to work with Ben and IT to hack it onto YouTube somehow. So apologies that didn't get taken care of in the last few weeks. And once that is on YouTube, it will let me do the minutes a lot easier, because there are some things I need to go back and find if I did not completely do them, and that is why the minutes are not ready as well. So once that is resolved, we have an avalanche of success.
All right, thanks, Mike. There's a question from Vicky.
Hi, Mike. Can you just let me know when it is up? I know I've been messaging you periodically, but I just know.
Yes. I will, as soon as I find out, I will let you know, and I will let Ben know. If anybody else needs to access it. But yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Vicky. Now we go to standing committee reports, of which there are none, so far as I can tell. We have a special order at noon, 45 minutes away. So we will proceed to business arising from the minutes. There's a motion to suspend council procedure 6, elections and referenda, that I have submitted. I will read it now to you. Whereas the 2020 to 2025 strategic and long-range plan and 2021-2022 annual plan have established the necessity of a comprehensive review of WUSA governance, and whereas WUSA has engaged the consultants Risser and Hughes to prepare a report for the 14th of November 2021 regular meeting of council to include recommendations to address systemic issues in WUSA governance. enter side note, we just changed the date of that, so it's actually the 21st of November, but nevertheless. Whereas Students' Council received at the 26th of September regular meeting of this year, my report, which advised that Council may have to postpone elections to implement a new governance model for the 1st of May 2022, and to expect, quote, significant changes to WUSA governance, including changes to the powers, size, and composition of the board, council, and executive. Then be it resolved that Students' Council suspend Procedure 6, elections and referenda, to delay the start of the nomination period until at least after the 14th of November 2021 regular meeting of Council, that being a 3-week delay of the 13-week nomination period. And be it further resolved that Students' Council task the President with preparing choices for the general election timeline for approval at the 14th November regular meeting of Council. And of course, those dates are both now the 21st of November. So it'll be a 4-week delay to the start at least. And we'll have a much better idea about how to go about this with the report in hand. But this is basically a motion to pass the buck to me in the future to have something more substantive planned, but we still need justification or like approval to not conduct an election under the present system. So I have moved this. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it, Vicky.
Thanks, Vicky. So I sort of touched on the logic of this in my report, where I also mentioned that ERC approved delaying to council to today decide, or to go with this direction. I'm happy to take any questions. Yeah, this is really like the motivation of this is to make sure our ducks are in a row, as they say, and allow us to have a sort of strategy for how we want to approach the general election once we have this governance review in hand. I'm seeing no questions. So that will, I guess, bring us to a vote on the resolution. Does anybody oppose the motion to postpone the start of the nomination period until at least after the next regular meeting of council, at which point I will be bringing like a timeline for approval? Does anybody wish to abstain? Okay, hearing neither, that carries unanimously. And we have postponed the start of the nomination period for the general election. That brings us to the second item of business arising from the minutes, which we approved at the start of the meeting, on approval of the sustainability policy, which I shared via email to the council mailing list. Maybe I can attach it in the chat. I don't know if that's the thing you can do. You can also share my screen. Maybe that's a better way to do this. But council has seen it. There are no changes, in fact, from the last time council saw it, other than board has said, yes, approve this, council, please. So really, this is, again, sort of a pro forma thing. Like council was ready and prepared to pass it, from my understanding last time, and then on procedural trickery, we figured out we shouldn't actually do that. So I'm going to share my screen. My computer's also having a bit of difficulty here, so bear with me.
Hey, look, everybody, it's Big Ben.
Big Ben?
Just because you're the entire screen now.
Okay, so this is the sustainability policy. It basically it's actually a pretty short policy statement. recognizes the importance of working towards sustainable activities on campus and the establishment of a sustainable purchasing guide for an internal resource to share with societies and clubs and other groups to, yeah, I guess, lead us along the path to a more sustainable future. That was also the reason that board sort of got invoked, because it started talking about operations, and I guess it's a corporate policy. Yeah, happy to take any questions on the sustainability policy. Vincent.
Hi, so I just want to make sure I'm correctly reading this policy. So is the idea here that like bodies of WUSA, like clubs and stuff, are not going to be like mandated and like required to follow this, but it's more that this is just a guide to help them. The expectation is, you know, if some society club, you know, goes to their society budget meeting, that, you know, the society is not going to be like, why are you spending money on non-plastic cutlery, and like just to basically say like, yes, it's okay to, you know, if it makes sense to spend a little bit more for a more environmentally friendly option. Is that the idea here?
Yep, that's right, Vincent. And I think that I've highlighted here, I think perhaps the operating word is that Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association strives to enhance, et cetera, et cetera. So it's an aspirational policy. And you'll recall that this was sort of the subject of discussion at EAC about society's rights. And we sort of arrived at, like, this is an aspirational policy. This is something that we strive to do. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thanks.
All right. Any other questions on this here sustainability policy? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can get back to the safety of looking at Connor's live notes. And we will go to a vote. Does anybody oppose approving the sustainability policy as presented? Does anybody wish to abstain? Hearing neither, that carries unanimously. And we have made some policy amendments. Very exciting. Shout out to Michelle for doing that. I don't think she's present. But yeah, did a good one on that. Okay, now there are no general orders, which brings us to new business. Any councillor may raise any item of concern during new business by proposing a motion on a topic of discussion. Or a topic of discussion. A 2/3 majority vote is required for consideration of an item to proceed. What I will say is we are due to have a special order at noon. That would give us a 35-minute recess for coffee, perhaps. But we did, I guess, have some stuff that we were talking about during the report of the engineering caucus. So we can bring that up now to discuss some more, or we can do a little adjournment and return at noon. Let's hear from Vicky.
I just was wondering, I mean, depending on if they're wanting to, but maybe for future stuff, for any new counselors that do come in, like maybe after by-elections, to have some sort of like 3-ish 2-hour training so they know what to expect at council. Because I know personally when I came, like the April I came, I was like, very, very confused. Mind you, I was only like an intern for that 1 year, but then even then there wasn't training, so I was confused all last year, and this year was the only time I got like kind of a better handle on what is supposed to be happening.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. There's definitely a learning curve to council, and I guess especially for people joining in by-elections who missed the formal transition that we did. So thanks. Cannon has a hand up.
I'm just gonna kind of say, in normal years pre-COVID, we do have like these kind of trainings that happen for new council. I think with COVID, the way things are, I guess it's kind of like, I'll take it as the officer of council. It's my job to train new councilors, and I'll try and find some materials that I can send, at least some slides or something that we had previously that can be sent to councilors when they join, so they have the basics down at least.
Thanks, Cannon. One other thing, I guess like formally, like we're supposed to talk, like suggest a topic to discuss and then vote if we want to talk about it or not. But I feel like we're just kind of talking about things. I've been thinking as well about like the implications of staff resources on holding multiple by-elections a year, where we elect like 2 people at a time, and it takes like, you know, dozens of staff hours. And I'm wondering if it might be worth like institutionalizing, like we hold a single by-election in the fall, and then it's just like, that's the deal. And kind of work off that to simplify things for staff. And as well, like we wanted to hold a Senate by-election in the spring, but the Senate doesn't allow us to for their own bylaw. So there are definitely, I think, are ways that we could like formalize by-elections processes to benefit people. And then we have like, you know, a mid-year training session or something. I saw Mike had a hand up.
I was just gonna say, Cannon connect with me this week, and I can dig through Abby's files when she did council transition in May.
Thanks, Mike. And Cannon?
I was just gonna say, I think that's a good idea, especially because we do allow societies to send pro tempore designates to council if they're unfilled seats. Because the time we have a by-election, it will save a lot of resources. So maybe that is something we need to start doing.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that we could definitely, like, since the governance review is going to like give us an opportunity to do a comprehensive review of the bylaws, like there's an opportunity to sort of deal with those things. Ban by-elections. I think we have to have by-elections, unfortunately. But seeing nothing else, I'm going to declare a recess of this meeting until noon, when we will hear a special order from Sonia Buffon, I think is her last name, the director of teaching assessment under the Associate Vice President Academics office. Let me try to find it. But anyway, like, you know, like the end of course evaluations, the university trying to do like a sort of formal review of that. We're hearing from the director leading that at noon when we return. So you feel free to stay on the line or rejoin the meeting. I guess I'll keep my computer running, but I'm going to stop the recording.